Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for being here today. For this lesson, we're going to focus on how to create a sunset setting. We're going to have some clouds, a nice glow somewhere in the middle, reflecting on our water here. And then we're going to have some ripples and then also a little dock. And then we're going to have a boat here. That's the goal. Let's see what happens as always and have fun. I'm going to go over the materials we need for this project. For canvas, I'm using a 16 by 12 gallery canvas. You can use any size canvas you want. Remember, if you're painting bigger, make sure to add a little more paint when I'm showing you, right? Or if it's smaller canvas, add a little less. Also, what I did to prepare the canvas is I added a glaze of water everywhere and let it naturally dry, and it tightens up the loose corners, makes my canvas nice and firm. I don't need to add anything else to it. As you can see, the canvas is white. It already has gesso on it. Saves a lot more time just getting a nice quality canvas and painting straight on. For brushes, we need 2 of my M1 blending brushes. And then also this is a size smaller M2 blending brush. And because the canvas is smaller, for the little sections and little parts, it's just easier to add paint. And then when you need to blend with a bigger brush, you can blend everything in. Next, I'm gonna use my 4-piece brush set and I'll show you what's inside. We have the number 8 and number 4 brushes. They're like filbert style synthetic hair. When you leave them in the water for a few minutes, they become nice and soft. And so I use these a lot for little blends, for grass effects, things like that. And then we have a 1/2 inch flat brush and a 0 detail brush for all the little fine details we're going to be adding. For paint, I'm going to use my 24 set of acrylics, and I'll show you which colors from this set. We need medium yellow, orange, crimson red, ultramarine blue, and lamb black. From my 5 set of acrylics, I'm going to use titanium white. We need palette, and I'm going to use my palette paper here, and then also a palette knife to mix your paint, a jar of water, some paper towels to wipe your palette knife or dab some of your brushes onto if you need to clean some paint or if you have too much water, right? For this project, we're going to use masking tape because I want to create a straight line where the sky meets land, and I want to use this. It'll help me save time instead of with my flat brush eyeballing it, right? You could do that too if you want, but this just makes it easier. And this is 1.5 inches, but you could use 1 inch or bigger. And finally, if you have a hairdryer, go ahead and use that. It speeds up the process of drying time. But if you don't, that's okay. You can naturally let it dry, which takes about 20 to 30 minutes. Most of these materials are available at ColorByFeliks.com if you're interested. But I always say you can use anything you have available. I'm also going to have a color mixing guide for you in the description down below if you'd like to download that. It's free. It just makes it easier to follow along the amount of ratio I add for each color. And I'll be obviously showing you guys here and explaining the best I can. But if you want to follow along and have more of an easier understanding, there will be a link in the description down below for you to download. I like to start from the furthest distance and work my way up to whatever is closest to me, right? So the sky is going to be the furthest distance. So let's begin mixing colors for our first layer of the sky. All right, so I got my palette here, palette paper, and these are the colors I have for my lightest color. About a thumb amount of white, maybe a little more, and then medium yellow, and then a thumb amount of white here and some orange, a little bit of that there, and then less white here, just a little less white than this one, and then a little bit of orange, and then crimson red, and then 1/2 thumb amount, maybe less white here, and then crimson red and ultramarine blue, and then about the same amount of white here, a little bit of crimson red, and more ultramarine blue here. All right, as I was mixing, I thought I would add, because I want to add some highlights to my clouds, and this one was very bright. So actually I added orange to my first one, and then a little more medium yellow. Okay, and then this one I added a little more orange, as you could see, and a little bit of yellow. So this should be a little darker because it's less white and more of orange on this one. But I want it to be a little bit more on a darker like a color, because when I go into adding our clouds and then I'm gonna mix some highlights, right? and this is kind of the color for the highlights that I want. So let's continue. Finally, as I was mixing, this was a little bit too dark for my sky, so I added more white here and a little more white here. All right, so these are the colors I have. Okay, so something like this and you'll be good to go. So right now I'm gonna dab my palette knife in a water jar all the way, pick up my paper towel and wipe it real quick so that it'll be clean for my next use. All right, let's pick up our water jar and our M2 blending brush. It's a smaller one, right? We're gonna dab it all the way in the water like this and squeeze part of the water out, okay? You still have some water in there, but it's not a lot. And every time I say I'm dabbing my brush in the water, just a tip, if I need more water, right? I'll dab it lightly, pick up more paint, and swirl and equalize it with paint everywhere. I don't want water dripping, that means I have too much water, and I would encourage to pick up more paint and kind of blend it all in. But if you feel like the paint is dragging and it's not running like butter smooth on the canvas, then you probably need more water. That's when I would dab my brush slightly in the water, pick up more paint, right? And I'll be explaining every step. This is a quick process, so if you're not familiar with the blending technique, watch this through and then follow along and maybe even practice, because once you catch the technique, it's a lot of fun and you can do all sorts of cool blends. So for the sunset, we're gonna cover about like 6 inches, maybe 5. And if you go a little lower, that's okay. We're gonna be painting on the bottom, and it's actually better that you do go a little lower anyway. That gives us room to play when we go into adding your masking tape, right? So the goal is the sun is gonna be somewhere in the middle, maybe a little bit to the right. And we're gonna have more of the orange and darker red color on the bottom. Usually I start with the lighter color and go to the darker blues, but I wanna do a little bit of orange and red on the bottom and going into a little bit of in the middle of the lighter colors with a yellow orange here, and then it's gonna go into like the pink and the blue on top right here. We are gonna have some clouds, so a lot of this is gonna be covered as well. Let's start with let's start with the lightest color, and we're gonna add it in the middle. So I'm gonna pick up all the paint like this, right? And we're gonna go down about this much, but I'm gonna put it in the middle right in here. Okay, I'm gonna swirl, kind of add it all over like this. That's good enough. I'm gonna lightly dab my brush in the water and then pick up the next color, this orange. And right on the bottom, I'm gonna add that orange. Add that orange on the bottom, and it's okay if you kind of mix it in together. I'm not pressing too hard, right? And then we're gonna add a little bit of that orange, I guess, on top as well here. Just a little bit, that's good. We need some room over here for our blue sky, so I'm not gonna go into too much. And then I'm gonna use this orange right here, and then go up a little bit with water and paint. Quickly mix it in, right? I'm not gonna bring that orange up. I'm gonna lightly dab my brush in the water. I'm gonna use this one, the next one, right? It's kind of like bluish, gray looking color, red. And I'm gonna add it right here. Right on the bottom. Okay, you can pick it up kinda, but like this. So now I'm gonna quickly clean my brush in the water, real quick, just real quick like this. It doesn't have to be fully clean. And then squeeze your brush fully so you won't have too much water, right? And then we're gonna start to add our next colors. Let's continue with this one, just a little bit on top right here. Dab my brush lightly in the water. Okay, real quick with that color. Okay, a lot of this is going to be covered with clouds. So I'm going to dab my brush in the water, and then the rest I'm going to add the blue. So I'm going to add the blue all around. Let it mix with all your colors here. So I have enough water, so I'm going to continue adding that blue to my sky, covering the rest of the canvas. Okay. We're going to have some clouds here, so this part's going to be covered. But mainly this area. I want this area to be a little more on the blue side. But that's good enough right there. Okay. So now I'm going to put my blending brush in the water, pick up my dry blending brush, all right, and then start from the middle side and swirl gently from lightest area to the darker parts. And I'm barely pressing, moving my paint around. For this part, you can even go like this because there's going to be more clouds on the bottom here. And then on top here, we're going to do this. I want that glow of the light yellow still showing through. Okay, and then we can swirl back up here. And the reason why I swirl is because it fills in all the canvas cracks and you don't see canvas showing through. It takes away the brush strokes and just makes it cleaner looking. So this area I'm not worried about it because I'm going to have some clouds here. I want mainly the blue side right here showing through. Okay. So quickly blend that gently. Take away all the brush strokes. And once you're done, we're going to wash our blending brushes real quick so they won't sit in the water too long. And then we'll let this dry and start to add our clouds and our sun. All right, my background is dry and I got a new water, right? And my blending brushes are clean. Now I can continue to the next section. So I'm gonna mix some colors. I did have paint left over. I don't wanna let this go to waste. So what I'm gonna do is just take all this, put it right here, and then also take this color, mix it with this, and then take the blue. Let's just mix all these three, whatever color you have left. Let's just mix it all in as one color here, right? So we're gonna get like a, still it's leaning towards more of the red, which is good. We're gonna use this color for our clouds, okay? Now I'm gonna add some more colors, a little bit darker for my clouds. So I added a little bit of white, a small amount of ultramarine blue, and more crimson red, and then less white here, more ultramarine blue, and a touch of crimson red. So I'm gonna mix these, and then I might take some colors from here, but I'll show you. So I'm gonna take part of this orange that we have mixed, mix it with this color. All right, just make it a little bit warmer. Quickly mix that. That's good enough. All right, and then finally I'm gonna take part of this, mix it with my final color. I want it to lean towards more blue, but still be dark. That's much better right here. I want this blue to be darker than the background blue here, right? Because our clouds are going to be closer to us, so we want to create some depth and separation from the background colors, right? And the reason why I added, remember, more of the orange to the background, it's still like more of a dimmer, you know, not too bright of the background sky, because when we add our sun and highlights to our clouds, it's gonna make them stand out a little more. As always, clean your palette knife, right, with a paper towel, and then let's put our brushes, number 8 and number 4 brushes in the water, let it sit for a few minutes, right, And I'm gonna be using these colors right here. So all the colors I have left right there, and then the new ones I just mixed. So while my brushes are sitting in the water, I did add a little bit of white, and I'm gonna mark where I want my sun to be, because that'll give me more of an easier way to see where I need to place my clouds, right? So now my brushes are good. I'm gonna tap it on the paper towel, and now it's nice and soft. It has a little bit of water, not too much, right? And so with a little bit of white, just to mark it and get an idea, I'm gonna take part of the white. So I'm gonna go up, probably the sun is going to be, this is the center of the canvas. So I'm gonna go a little bit to the right. So I'm gonna go higher. I'm gonna actually go about this much right here. This is where I want my sun to be, very small. You could do this with your detail brush as well, but I'm gonna make it small like this, all right? And so now I'm gonna quickly start to sketch my first shapes of my clouds. Let's start with this orange. Let's mix it with a little bit of this color we have added. We mixed randomly, right? Let's just mix that, and then right around where this sun is, actually, you see it kind of blends in. I'm gonna use a little bit of this red, darker color, because I want it to stand out a little bit more. That's much better. I'm gonna take a little bit of orange, because I don't want it to be too strong. I want it to be lightly showing through, right, the clouds next to the sun. And I'm gonna randomly start to add my clouds. In your shapes, you could see I'm adding random shapes. They could be different. So I'm gonna dab my brush in the water, tap it on the paper towel because it helps me run smoothly on the canvas. I'm gonna make it a little more of this, just a little bit more of this color, but more on the orange side next to my sun. Right here, we're gonna have some clouds randomly. Okay, so a little more orange and this red. Mix those two. And then we're gonna start to add a little more clouds and separations. And your shapes could be a little different, but you don't want to make them too big, right? These are further away, so make them kind of small. I'm gonna mix more of this. I like this color better than that one. That one's more on the brown side. I wanna lean more towards the pink side. So, but we might use this, we'll see. Sometimes it's a hit and miss, you never know. Just gotta keep trying and mixing your colors and seeing how it looks, and then adjusting as you go. That's what I do all the time, to this day. And the more you do it, the faster and easier it gets, of course. So here, it's gonna slowly go up, right? And you see a lot of separation going on. I'm not trying to fill that area in. And then as I go up in here, I'm gonna add a little bit of clouds like this, and some in here, right? Dab my brush in the water, use this color and a little bit more of the orange, and we're gonna start to make it a little bit more darker. And this is a rough sketch we're doing here. Okay, so I'm gonna continue. Orange and this darker red. Okay, that's good right there. And as I go in here, dab my brush in water, I'm gonna use this color by itself now, the color we've mixed, and make it a little darker, maybe even play with this orange actually, because we want a smooth transition, right? And I'm gonna make this one kind of go straight and a little higher. So a little more of this color. Use a little bit more orange. Add some little ones in here. Okay, a little more of this color. And let's add it right in here. Make this a little darker as well, right? Because as it gets further, up, we don't want it to blend in and disappear. We want it to look a little darker. Okay, I'm going to use this color by itself again. Go in here, start to add a little bit more. Randomly like this. Okay, and now I'm going to dab my brush in water and use this color, right? And now we're going to, just by itself, we're going to make this as the darkest. So this is going to go up. Remember I said part of this is going to be covered by a cloud here. So you just blend it in with the colors we've already added quickly, right? This is a first sketch. So we're going to go over again with the same colors and it's going to really pop. But you could see I'm kind of skipping some areas because I like those little showing through the background, sky showing through, right? So I'm going to add a little bit of these colors in here right on top. I'm going to skip some areas. Okay. Continue with that color. We can attach some of these like this one. Maybe this one goes up a little bit higher and then separates a little bit. And add a little bit of a darker color in here. Add more of it in on this side and make this one kind of go straight. Something like that. And a little bit in here. Okay. And I know it looks a little bit rough, but we're gonna add more layers and you'll see it's gonna come together nicely. So right here, I dab my brush in water. I'm gonna go back to this kind of red color here and blend some of these with the blue. go down a bit with water and that red color. And then try to carry some of the paint down so you could to create that smoother transition, right? So a little bit of this color and water, for example, in here, right? And then here, I'm actually going to, let's go back to this orange and this red a little bit. And here I'm going to make it go a little bit more this way. So I'm going to add some smaller ones like this, just to make it more interesting. So it could be a smoother like transition. Into the background colors. I'm going to go back to this red color, maybe mix it with a little bit of the blue, and go over these areas here. Add a little bit more, maybe a little more blue. So I'm going to continue that effect, dab my brush in the water, use this red, darker red color, and mix it in with the blue we just added. Just kind of swirl your brush, and that creates more of a blend between the colors we've already added. And bring it down. I'm going to use a little bit of this blue and red, mix those two together, and I'm going to try to make this a little bit more darker in here. Maybe it comes down like this, right? I'm just having fun with this right now. I'm placing my shapes of the clouds where I think would look best and balanced, but I am going to keep certain areas like this. I like this, that it's bright here and here, certain areas open, right? We don't want to overdo it and cover too much. Okay, so keep that in mind. Okay, I'm actually even thinking that's good enough for now. And this is again, this is our first layers. I'm going to add a little bit here so that this area won't be too empty. So I'm just going to go with this orange and a little bit of this pink or this darker red color, and I'm going to add a few far away ones. Barely, you can barely see them. Okay, you can barely see it. There you go. Right? We don't want to make it too dark. Very, very small amount. And then in here, I'm going to add a little bit of this color with water. I'm going to try to make this a little bit darker. Right? I want to create a glow. I want more of a darker transition into this area. This is going to be where the glow is. So I'm going to add a little bit more orange in this color randomly, something like this. I'm going to work around and add little details, little clouds, right? And once I'm done with that, I then can go back and using the same kind of colors that we have already added and repeat the process one more time to take away the brush strokes and fill it in, and it's going to look really nice. So a little bit of orange and this color. I'm going to dab my brush lightly in the water and tap it on the paper towel. And then now I'm just going to swirl. So I'm going to use a little bit of this color with water. And I'm going to go back here and swirl. Take away the brush strokes, right? This is our third layer we're adding over because our clouds are already dry here, which we want. I'm going to use a little bit of orange for the lighter parts, right? I don't want it to be too dark. I'm going to go over with water and make it soft, right? Skip some areas. You see how there's some light shining through. We just want to make it look a little softer and cleaner, right? And let the shapes naturally happen to you. See, I wasn't trying to make it look a specific way. I just kind of wanted darker clouds on top and more of like the red-orange on the bottom because of the glow of the sun. And as long as you have that, your placements of clouds could be different than mine. So a little bit of orange and red. And we're gonna continue. Maybe there's some little one separations in here. Maybe some of these are connecting. I'm gonna try to take this one and separate it a little bit. So now as I go into the darker area, I'm going to use the darker color, swirl and add that darker shade. All right, so now I'm gonna continue with this and some water and go to the blue parts. Start to blend it into the blue. Even if you cover some of the blue, that's fine. We just want to make it look softer now. So a little bit of this with water. Let's go over some of these parts right here. So a little more of this color and water. Take away all the brush strokes, repeat the process. And as you go up, of course, go dab your brush in water, go to the darker blue color, and basically that's it. You're gonna be just going over everything, blending it, making sure you take away the brush strokes. Right? Making it look a little smoother. So a little more blue. Okay, continue on. And there you go. So once you're done with that, we're gonna start to add some highlights. All right, so I added a little bit of white, and I'm gonna take part of this, and if your paint is drying, you can just, and you can't use some of these colors, you can just add a medium yellow and a little bit of orange, but the goal is to create it, make it lighter, okay, than these colors. So, but I'm gonna take part of this since I still have paint. I just moved it a little bit like that, and then just take part of it, not a lot, and then mix it with a white. And maybe I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow so it can be brighter. Right here. Let's actually do that right now. A little bit of yellow, medium yellow, so it can glow. And I'll show you how it looks. So a little bit like this, right? With white. Quickly mix that. All right, so you could see it's lighter than this one. This is going to be our highlights for the clouds. So I'm going to use my detail brush, dab it in the water, and then I'm going to use this color right here. And first, I'm going to go over my sun. So the sun that we added, I'm going to add it right here. Create a bright circle. And then dab my brush in the water, use less paint, so I'm going to take paint away like this and more water. And around the sun, I'm going to add a little bit more glow. You can see that it has more water, it's running smoothly on the canvas, right? It's not too much paint, it's more water with a little bit of paint. But I'm adding that second layer over my sun and then kind of blending it out, creating that glow. Okay, that glow effect. And we don't need to make it big, just a little bit around the sun and let it fade out into the background color we just added. And we're going to repeat the process until we're happy with how it looks. Our sun, right? The glow. All right, you can see it's kind of starting to happen there, but I'm going to continue while that dries. I'm going to continue with adding my highlights, so detail brush, and starting from these clouds here next to the sun, I'm going to start to add these little details. Okay, I don't want to add too much, I don't want to overdo it, but I do want to add them because it'll make my clouds pop a little better. Okay, dab my brush slightly in the water, and then use a little bit of paint with water. We're going to continue going on the bottom, right? Very gently go around your clouds, and then go around on top as well on some of these. Okay, right here as well. And take your time. I like to wipe it off real quick instead of using a paper towel. I just take away paint if I added too much, right? So I'm constantly dabbing my brush in the water and then swirling, not using too much paint. And I'm going over very lightly certain parts, making my clouds stand out a little better. So I'm going to add a little bit over here, not too much, because these clouds are further away, so I'm going to use more water. You can barely see it, but I'm adding that very tiny highlight around, so I'm barely having any paint. And with water, I'm going to just go over and let it fade out. I don't want to add too much to the background. And then as you go up, you just continue, right? Going over, you can even add some separations. Totally up to each person. And as they get closer to the bigger clouds, you want to make your highlights a little bigger, right? For example, right here. Right, I'm going to make it a little bigger. Not everywhere, but on some of them. You can make them bigger on some of them. Yeah, I'm going to brush in water and then continue adding a little bit more brighter highlights here to this cloud, both on top and on the bottom. And you can skip some areas. It doesn't have to be perfectly all around, right? Dab my brush slightly in the water. I don't want too much brightness. I want it to be faded. And go around this cloud as well. That's good enough for now. But as you could see, now we're starting to see more depth because of this layer, because of these highlights, right? So I'm going to continue working right here on the bottom. Remember I told you the background, like when we were first mixing, that's why I made it a little bit more orange, because now this stands out a little better now because we added more white and yellow, right? You can kind of see the highlight better. So I'm going to go over these randomly. The goal is to remember that the light is, the sun is shining and hitting the bottom parts of most of these clouds here, right? And then we're going to have a little bit, some highlight on some of these on top, right? Not too much, but just a little bit. That way you could see that, you know, the transition happening. So I'm going to continue here. So take your time on this. Again, it does not have to look like mine, right? But that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to spend some time adding all my highlights. And then once I'm done, I'll show you what I get. And then we'll go from there. We'll work on probably the next part. Once we added that, we're going to work on adding the glow of our sun, making it stand out a little better. All right, you could see I spent time going over my highlights, adding the brightest highlights around most of my clouds, and then also some orange smooth transitions on just to make some of these clouds softer, going back and forth until I was happy. The goal is to create a smooth transition, and remember, the more layers you add, the smoother it's going to become, right? So from lightest going into the darker, like gray blue on top, right? That's the goal. So something like this, and you'll be good to go. Remember, it does not have to look exactly like mine. But let's move on and finish our sun. We want to make it a little brighter, so with a detail brush and some white, plain white, we're going to go over again, right, and make it even brighter with just white. And you can make it bigger if you'd like, but don't make it too big. We want it far away, and make it as clean as you can. More white in the middle, right? And then I'm going to clean my brush, and then the bright yellow, right, this color right here that we have mixed with water, that's the next brightest color. And we're going to swirl our brush like we always do, and around the sun we're going to add the glow. Add another layer of water and this yellow glow. Doing the same thing, right? And then fading it out, blending it out gently with water. And that's how you create smooth transitions with acrylics. And then once you added this layer, right, we're going to let it dry and repeat the process again until we're happy with our glow. Obviously, as you go out, you can switch your brush to a bigger brush like a number 4, right? But since I'm working small, it's fine. I'm not going to make the glow too big, right? But you could see a nice smooth transition out to my sky with water. So I'm going to let this dry, and I'm going to repeat the process one more time. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my number 8 brush, dab it in the water, right? It's nice and damp. With a little bit of water and medium yellow, we're going to use a little bit of medium yellow in water, mostly water. Okay, we're going to glaze this color over some of our clouds here to make it even brighter, glow a little more. For example, right here, right? We're going to make it a little bit brighter. And just go over your clouds. And you could see how it's making it more brighter, right? So that's what we want. And we want to add a little bit here as well, right? I'm going to bring it up. It's a very, very small transparent layer, but it makes a big difference to your clouds. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit here, and just glaze it. Makes it my clouds more warmer looking. Remember, mostly water and a little bit of that yellow, not too much. Okay, that's it. That's good enough, not too much. All right, and it's hard to see on the camera, maybe these little details, but in person, it really, you could see the difference, you know? So now that I think it's pretty much dry, I'm gonna repeat the process one more time to make it even, my sun pop even more. So with white and my detail brush, I'm gonna go over my sun one more time. You see how it makes it even brighter? And right in the middle, I'm gonna try to make it as circular as I can. I'm gonna add that white, right? So now I'm gonna clean my brush and then use that next brightest color, that white and yellow we added, right? And go around the sun one last time. And you can do this as much as you want. You can even add one more layer after this if you'd like. Take your time on it, don't rush it. But that's how you create. You see how nice and smooth that looks, starting to look, right? And then with water, as you see, we're working transparently and swirling and carrying our paint outwards. And that's good enough. If you've been enjoying this lesson so far and want to help support this channel, check out my Patreon. It's a great way to be a part of the creative process and help keep these tutorials ad-free and accessible to everyone. Inside Patreon, you'll get access to high-res reference photos, commercial-free versions of my YouTube lessons, behind-the-scenes content, and you can even help me vote on future painting topics. It's a small way to support this free content, but it makes a big difference. Thank you to everyone who supported me over the years. I appreciate you all. Now let's get back to painting. Here's what we got so far, a view of the whole canvas. So now, once I'm done with the sun, right, I added a glaze of yellow to make it more glowy. Now I'm going to mix some colors for our faraway trees and little mountains in the back. And then we're going to use masking tape to create a nice straight line for the base of our water. So these are the colors I added. Very small amount of white right here, and a touch of medium yellow, and then more orange. And then here a little less white, and a little more medium yellow and less orange, and then crimson red. And then here less white, and then crimson red and ultramarine blue, and then a touch of white, a little more ultramarine blue, lamb black, and crimson red. So I'm going to mix these colors and show you what I get. As I was mixing, I decided to add a little bit of black to this one and ultramarine blue. I want to make this one a little darker, and then this should be the darkest color. Let's continue mixing. And here are the colors. So something like this. I'm going to zoom in the camera and we're going to draw our land or little mountains and trees somewhere right in here. So a lot of this is going to be covered with water. All right, for now, for our faraway mountains, let's start with the flat brush, dab it in the water, tap it on the paper towel, and we're going to start with this color, this kind of red orange color. Okay, and then with water where the sun is, right, because it's closer to the sun, that's why I'm going to be using more of the warmer colors. And then as I go into closer mountains, they're going to be more on the grayish blue color, right? But next to the sun, let's start here. We're going to go down about this much, so literally like a quarter of a way down, and yours could be a little higher or lower, whatever you want. So I'm just going to randomly kind of go like this, bring it down, pick it up a little bit and fade it out, something like this. And just bring it down. Okay. Next, we're going to use this color, right? This one. Same thing with the flat brush. We're going to start to paint a little bit of a closer ones, overlaying this here. And we're just going to bring it down. We're going to have we're going to add some masking tape for the bottom part, but I focus more on the top part for now. Okay, so something like this, and then we're going to continue this color and continuing. You don't cover the red we just added, just a little bit over, and then as you go up here, it's gonna come higher. Okay. And then here we can switch to our number 4 brush because the mountains are going to get a little closer to us and they're going to you're gonna kind of start to see more of the trees. So I'm gonna use my number 4, right? Tap it on the paper towel so you won't have too much water. And with this color, we're gonna continue this where we left off here, and I'm just gonna gently dab. And then as I go in a little bit here on the darker side, I'm gonna use the darker color here and pick it up. Bring it down. Use this color here. And then the darkest color again, right here. Okay, something like this. All right. And now I'm gonna make a little bit of trees like this, far away. Okay, that's good enough. So now I'm gonna use the darkest color, continue with my number 4 brush, and we're gonna make this a little taller. And we're gonna kind of go up and down, right? Totally up to you. These are closer trees, so they're gonna have a little more detail. I'm gonna bring this down just to give variety, right? Bring it down a little bit, and then you can pick it back up. You can do this all the way to the corner here. Right? With that darkest color we mixed. Okay, and now I'm just going to bring this down all the way. A lot of this is going to be covered by water. So I'm going to bring it down. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so once it's dry, you measure from the top down with a ruler and try to measure this side first. So go a little bit higher so it could be small, right? I marked it with paint with the lightest color, and then the same height from here, I marked it right there. And then with tape, because these are further away mountains, right? This one is going to be a little closer to us, so we're going to leave a little bit of it coming down, right? So we're going to do another tape on this side. But let's start with this one first. So I'm just going to go all the way for now on top. So I measured the same amount here in the middle, here, and here. So you could see right there, and then about right there, and then right there, and go all the way about this much, right? So now I'm gonna gently press on the canvas. You could use your nail to make sure it's fully sealed here. Just the bottom part, not the top part doesn't matter. Just the bottom part we want You want to make sure it's nicely covered so that when you put paint on, it won't go through the paint out, right? And if you get some paint going up a little bit, it's easy to fix it. You just use a detail brush and the paint we have mixed to kind of go over the top, and if you want it to be, you know, super perfect and make it super straight. But I do this to save time. Okay, so we're gonna start to paint the water. So I did add half a thumb amount of white here, and I'm gonna take this orange. I didn't really use it, that's okay. I'm gonna take part of this orange and mix it with the white. Actually, let's do that right now. Just this one that we mixed and leave it right here. And then I'm gonna take the leftover here and mix it with this. So half a thumb amount of white here, orange and crimson red. And then here, half a thumb amount of white, more crimson red. I'm gonna take part of this. I don't wanna let it go to waste. And then here, a thumb amount of white, a touch of crimson red and phthalo blue. And then a touch smaller amount of white here, more phthalo blue and a little bit of lamb black. Let's take all this right here. Leave a little bit. Let's leave a little bit because remember that part right here, we might be working on that part later. So let's just take a little bit of it. And I'm doing this so that I try not to waste paint. So now I'm going to quickly mix from lightest to darkest. So I decided to actually put tape for this part. And there's different ways of doing this, but I'm going to go very small. I'm going to try to bring it down a little bit, not a lot. I still want a little more of a straight line, right? But I want just a tiny bit showing through because this is closer land. I want to create depth. So I'm going to go about very small amount, barely anything, just to create a little more depth, right? So I went a little lower for this. Okay, let's pick up our M2 blending brush and dab it in the water all the way, and then squeeze part of the water out, right? As we did with the blending of the background, we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to try to reflect a little bit onto the water. So we're going to start with the lightest color and a little bit of water, and let's pick up this first one, and let's just start to add it randomly right here. So I don't have too much water. I have more paint, at least for this part. At least for this part. Okay, and here I'm gonna dab lightly my brush in water. I'm gonna use a little bit of blue. A little bit of blue. Okay, right here, just a little bit of blue. Mix it with that yellow. Okay, that's good enough. All right, so now I'm gonna dab my brush in water and then come back to this color, and I'm just gonna try to mix it all. Let's use the next color, mix it all in, go back and forth. All right, dab my brush in the water, and we're gonna go back to the lighter color. Let's go back and forth. Take all the lightest color here and just mix it in right here. And as you go down, we're gonna use the bright blue, this one, like we did, mix it in. A little bit of, let's use a little, yeah, let's continue using this color. Okay, maybe a little bit of pink. Why not? This is the base of our water. Obviously, we will make it look nicer, but for now, and there's going to be a boat here and, you know, a dock. So a lot of it's going to be covered right here. Okay, something like this. Let's use the rest of this. And then as you go down, obviously dab your brush in the water, use the darkest color, and just cover everything. Cover the whole canvas with this darkest color, blue. Real quick. All right, real quick. All right, that's good enough. It's rough. Now we're going to pick up our dry blending brush and kind of go back and forth and take away the brush strokes. Okay. And just gently blend everything. Go back and forth. Until you're happy with your blend. Okay. Take away all the brush strokes and let the paint, I'm not pressing hard, let the paint cover the canvas so that it could be one solid color. I'm not pressing hard, remember. Okay, gently. All right, we got a nice base of our water. All right, our background is dry, and now I can peel off the tape, gently going down like this. Okay, and then as you see, because of us pressing and making sure the tape is fully taped on the back, you don't have paint, you know, coming through the tape on sometimes if you, there's a little bit right here, but those little fixes are easy. But you can see this land right here, it's a lot closer to us, right? Because we brought it down, right? And it's darker. And the far away is the red one. So you're creating layers. That's what we're doing, right? We're trying to create depth, and now we have the base of the water, and here's how it looks as a whole image. I'm gonna quickly, to save time, I'm gonna quickly sketch out my boat, and then I'll explain, but this is so that it could save me time because I'm constantly thinking of the placement and the shape. So I'm gonna have the boat be somewhere where the sun reflection right here, it's gonna probably go down like 2.5 inches right here. That's where the start of the boat will be, and I'll draw it out like this, something like this, right here. And then the dock will be right next to it, going down. And probably we're gonna leave about 1 inch of water showing all the way right here. And then it's gonna go down in probably 1.5 inches and right here. So a lot of this is gonna be a dock. And here is the placements. So I used the detail brush in this color, right? This one right here. And then with water and this color, I just went over, again, about, I think I went up to like 2 inches where the sun is. That's where my first point of the boat starts. And I kind of slowly went around here. And I'll go over this with you guys again. But this is just to save time. I want to make sure that I like my placement. So I spent time in doing this very slowly, and then it's like 2 inches from here. That's where the, you know, the width of the boat is, and then 2 inches from the sun. And then I went over, loop right here, and went down. This is the shadow. This is going to be the shadow of the boat reflecting, so it's going to be pretty dark here. And then I went and made it. And you can make it as wide as you wish or as skinny as you wish, right? But this is kind of how I like it. And then I went over the board here. I went like 2 inches from the where we started here, 2 inches down to the right. I started drawing my board, where my dock, right? And then and the width of this is about like 2.25 inch width, right? So this is like an inch, a little more than an inch here, and then here it's an inch and like a half here. But you could see the dock is crooked. I don't want it to be straight because then it's too perfect. It doesn't look realistic. I want it to look kind of broken, you know, broken in, and there's some gaps in there. So I did my placements where I thought would look best. And so I went from there and kind of sketched out all the way down. And then there will be some, you know, shadows here. And again, I'll go over this with you guys. I kind of started drawing the ripples of the water with my paint here, right? So I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to actually mix a little bit of white. I'm going to take this pink part of it, maybe most of it, leave a little bit just in case, and then this orange color as well. Mix it with the white. I want to create a little bit of a lighter color. Okay. So something like this. With this color, we're going to start to add our first kind of layers of our reflection, ripples of the water. And again, your size, right? This is almost 2 inches. That's where the dock starts. And this is like 1.5 inches where it ends. But you could see the boards are crooked and not equal. It does not have to look like mine, but something like this and you'll be good to go. And then from the top down, it's like 1.5 inches going down in the water. And a lot of this is going to be pretty dark shadow, and we're going to add texture and detail to our boat. And I'll go over everything again with you guys. But with this color now, and in fact, before I'm going to use my number 4 brush so that you guys could get an idea. I'm going to use some water in this darkest color that we added to our faraway trees. This is going to be pretty dark here. So I'm going to just add a dark shadow right in here, so you guys could kind of get an idea. So a little bit of water in that. And it's okay if you go over your sketch. This is our real quick placement where I want my boat and dock to be. And then from there, we're going to start to layer. So this is the shadow of my boat. So a little bit more. Obviously, we're going to make it even darker. And then here, remember these? I drew these. So with my number 4, I'm going to start to kind of go over some of these and create gaps in my board. I kind of made it, you know, easier for me so that I can explain faster to save time, right? That's why I did that. So I'm going over and adding my shadows first. Darker shadows. All right. And I'm going to skip some areas. I'm not going to add everywhere. I'm going to go over some of them and add some smaller ones. Just doing the bigger ones. That's good enough for now. We're going to go back. Okay. You get the idea. And then we're also going to add some shadows right inside here. Right. And this is a rough sketch. And then here it's going to go kind of circular, right? We could use a little bit of this orange, why not? Add it a little bit of color randomly because of the glow of the sun right on around here. And let it fade out. You can add a little bit of color in here. And we'll go back to the darkest color. Just getting that quick sketch. All right, that's good enough. We'll obviously go back to all these little parts later. And then real quick let's add a little bit of orange. A glaze with our number 8 over some of these boards. It's okay if you go over your we're adding layers, right? Right now we're just adding all these beautiful layers, and you know how wood is, it has a lot of texture and all beautiful. And you could use this color as well to change it up. Highlights, you know, and things like that. So a little more of that red, and then here. This is just to let you guys see a little better. So a little more orange. And I'll go over everything again with you guys. All right, so now let's go back and use our flat brush, dab it in the water, and this color we just mixed. We're gonna start, I kind of already started a little bit, but you know, a little bit, maybe 2 inches down to the left. We're gonna go at an angle to create our ripples. We're gonna start right here. I'm gonna create a little ripple and let it skip some areas, you know, and the shape, as long as you get it somewhat similar to mine, but it does not have to look like mine, okay? Make some skinnier ones. And we're just gonna create some ripples. Okay, so a little more with water so it can run smooth on the canvas. We're gonna go over. Here, I'm gonna go over gently. I want that background color to still stand out. You see, I'm still going at an angle. Okay. And then here, there's going to be very small ones because they're further away. continue on. And then you can go back to the orange because it's closer to the sun. So we want it to glow a little more. Okay. And this is our second layer. And then fade it out, right? Just go back and forth. And then go back to this color we mixed. Make some bigger ones. I'm still at an angle here. And then I'm kind of going in here. And this is our first sketch of our ripples. You can even add a little more here for fun. All right. We're gonna have some tall grass here, so I'm not gonna add too much. All right, it's still looking rough. We'll obviously go over, but at least now we have kind of the base layers of our, where we're gonna have some ripples and where the boat is, the shadow, and then the dock, right? And this is like a little string, rope that holds the boat. And you can have it at any angle, it doesn't matter. But I drew it like this, okay? 2 inches up where I start into the boat. And quickly, as the final thing before we mix more colors and add the next layer on top of our water and work on the water part first, right? Is we're gonna add our reflection of the sun. So I added white a little bit and medium yellow and white. I'm gonna mix this, and with this color, we're gonna quickly add our first layer of the reflection of our sun with our detail brush. So I'm going to dab it in the water, and first let's use this color, this light yellow, and right where the sun is, right in the middle, we're going to try to reflect it. Okay? Reflect it as best as you can, going down all the way. can make it a little wider than you need to, but try to go straight down. And then as you get closer up here, we're going to skip some areas. So it's going to reflect and then it's going to fade away somewhere in here like that. Okay? And then after you added that yellow, we can now go back and add the white on top. This will be our first layer of the reflection. So clean your brush and just use the white, and right in the middle, that's going to be the brightest. I'm going to go over the sun. And then fade it out. Okay, we got the first layer of the reflection of the sun. I'm going to start fresh, and I added a little bit of white, and then half a thumb amount of white here, and then medium yellow, and then less white here, a little less medium yellow, and a little more orange, and then less white here than this one. Each time, basically, I'm going less with white, okay? And then a little bit less of orange and crimson red, and then crimson red, and then ultramarine blue, and then here, as you can see, the smallest amount of white, more ultramarine blue, and then a touch of lamp black and crimson red. So basically, I'm trying to mix colors kind of like what we did with our blend of the sky. I want to get similar colors so that I can work on my reflection on certain areas. I want it to kind of look similar colors, right? I don't want two different like color palettes. So some of the yellow and orange, we're going to reflect that here. So some of the paint, this is going to be like the main colors we're going to work off of, but we're also going to create brighter, you know, reflections like we did here. That's towards the end. We're going to add a glaze of yellow and maybe orange to create more of that bright look reflecting into some of the parts of our water, okay? And I'll show you how I do this, but let's mix the colors first and we'll continue. So I remember I did take a little bit of orange and mixed it with the yellow here because I want to lean towards more of the orange tones, right? And here are the colors, okay? So something like this, and you'll be good to go. So now I'm going to continue and go over and start to add more details. Let's start with our flat brush, dab it in the water all the way, and then make it nice and, you know, sharp. And with a little bit of water, and let's start with this orange right here. Okay, and we're gonna go over some of these right here. For example, I'm gonna continue right where I added the sun. Just gonna lightly dab and try to reflect some of this orange in my water. Skip some areas, right? We don't want to overdo it. Like, we want to create that glow, you know, so it won't look just flat. So I'm gonna fade this out. Barely pressing, as you could see. Okay. Continue on with a little bit of water and that orange color right next to the sun. This little detail makes a big difference to our painting here. But you could see I'm skipping some areas because I do like my background pink color showing through. I'm just adding some of this orangey color over the pink, not much. Trying to make it look a little bit more warmer where the glow is. And then we're going to fade it out. Just the orange by itself for now. Adding a little bit more color. Okay. I'm going to go ahead with the orange, go all the way in here. Okay, and then here I'm just gonna kind of glaze it over everything as it gets close. I'm gonna go to this color now with a little bit of water. It's a little darker, orangey red. And I'm gonna add a little bit of that in here. Very small amount. I'm using the corner of my brush and adding little ripples. Okay. Very small amount of details like that. And with water, I'm going to add a little more of this color. Far, far away. Maybe this is the reflection of some of the clouds. And this is what it is really right here. You see how clouds are right in the middle and kind of going out? This is kind of like a messy reflection. So now I'm going to go use the same color, this orangey color, right? This red orange. I'm going to add that right in here. All right, that's good enough for now. Now I'm going to go to this color, right? A little darker. And go over in here. Continue on. All the way to the boat. Making it a little darker because I want to kind of match a little bit more of the darker shadows right in here as you get lower. I'm trying to keep it at an angle, and when I'm looking at the sky, I'm trying to kind of reflect that down, you know? I don't want to keep it straight. I want to have a little of an angle so that it looks more like 3D, you know? Like, because if you keep everything straight, then it just looks flat. So these little details matter. So I'm going to continue with this color, and I'm going to go in a little bit in here because I want to create a smooth transition. I don't want it to be as it goes out, it fades, right? We don't want to create a rough transition to our reflection. We want to make sure it's smooth. Okay, so I'm going to continue with this and obviously try to make them a little smaller because these are further away, right, in the distance. Reflect a little bit of that darker color in here. Okay, and now finally dab my brush in water. I'm going to use this color here, the darkest, right? Maybe mix it with a little bit of the red, but it's leaning more towards the blue because of the reflection of our top of the clouds right here. They're more darker in blue, so I kind of want to reflect that a little. And your ripples don't need to be, perfect. You can have some little ones. Okay. Continue on with this color, the darkest color. And we're going to try to blend those in together, right? Remember the transition of the blue to the red and orange? That's what we're doing here. The darker kind of blue going into the red and orange right here, right? So the placement of your ripples, as long as it somewhat looks like, you know, the reflection, for example, this part right here, I'm kind of missing that. So I'm gonna try to reflect that right here, add a little bit more ripples, maybe red in here. And then fade it out. Continue on. Okay. And you can spend as much time as you want on these parts. This is where the details begin, right? And I'm just eyeballing it and trying to keep it on an angle, and as long as I have, like I said, the shading correct, then, and kind of like keep it at an angle, your ripples don't have to look exactly like mine, okay? Going over, making these darker. Okay, let's continue. Let's make some of these darker in here as well. And you can use a little bit of white, just a little bit of it. Mix it with the red and a little bit of this blue. I want to create a little bit of a lighter color for some of the lighter parts, for example, right here. Maybe it's starting to get a little lighter as you fade out, right? So a little more white. Because we want to create more of a nicer fade to that smooth water right in here, right? Okay, not too much. Very small amount. I'm gonna add a little bit of ripples in here. All right, I'm not gonna do too much. That's good enough there. And I want to keep it super transparent in here. And then go over with the lighter color on some of these areas in here. And then we're going to fade it out. Right, not too much. Okay. You can actually start to add a little bit of ripples going down this way. So now I'm going to continue with this and the red. Let's just mix those together. Continue with the dark color because I want to keep some of these pretty dark in here. Okay. And go back to this red color with a little bit of water. And I'm going to add a little bit more red in here. All right, next let's pick up our number 4 brush, make sure it's nice and damp, and tap it on a paper towel, right? You have a little bit of water, and right now we're gonna add a little bit, make some of these a little bit more, stand out a little more. So this faraway land here, I wanna brighten it just a little bit. So I'm gonna use this kind of orange-red color with water. I'm gonna glaze it. Actually, let's even make it lighter. So let's just use the lighter orange. Glaze it right where the sun is. And we're going to create that fade out because we want to create that glow. So a little more brighter in here. And now you could see separation happening from this land and that far away land, right? That's what we want. And you could fade it out, making this one a little brighter as well. So now I'm going to this color with a little bit of water, and I'm going to try to make some of these a little bit more. So I'm going to tap my brush in the water again. I want more water, and I'm going to start to glaze a little bit of darker color right next to the sun. That'll make my the reflection, the glow, pop even more. So I'm going to just go right next to where And it's okay, we're gonna go over the sun again. If you added too much, if you went over all your it's a transparent glaze, so we're not overdoing it. We're just adding a little bit of it. Let's actually use a little more red. Let's make it darker because I want my glow to really stand out. So a little more on this pink side, darker pink, and I'm gonna add it right in here and let it fade out. Same thing in here. And I'm gonna tap my brush in the water and then use a little bit of this kind of blue color, darker color. Right where we left off with the red, we're gonna add that. And then let it fade out to that light color. Of the background. Okay, just like that. All right, let's use a little bit of this color and add it on this side just a little bit. Let's use a little pink, darker red color, add some glazes in here. I'm going to use more of the darkest red color again, right? I want to add a little bit more of a darker tone in here. Dip my brush in the water. Bring it up all the way to the bright color. And we're just making it a little, stand out a little more, our glow. And then I'm gonna press a little bit harder, not too hard though, on here and fade it out. It's a lot of back and forth, but you're starting to see because I added that darker shadows in here, our glow is starting to pop even more. That's kind of the goal. And so now I'm gonna continue using that. Let's mix a little bit of this darker red and orange. I'm gonna create a warmer color, but still on the dark side. And then here, I wanna add some darker shadows, more of a softer look. Okay, dab my brush in water, do the same thing with the orange and the darker red color. And we're gonna go in here and make this a little darker. Okay, so let's pick up our flat brush and we're gonna continue and use this lightest yellow-orange color, right, with our flat brush. And we're gonna go over certain parts, like right here, I wanna make some of these a little brighter, right? And by the way, excuse the noises in the background. Our building is having construction here and there's really nothing I can do about it, so I'm sorry about that. And we're going to keep it at an angle. And you can also do this with your detail brush, by the way, if it's easier for you. And then here I'm going to kind of fade it out. All right, now I'm gonna glaze some of this orange with my number 8 brush and some water, right? And we're gonna make some of the parts stand out a little bit more and make it more warmer. So just the glaze of the orange, I'm going over certain parts. Okay, keeping some of them pretty light. Okay, but I wanna take away a little bit of that, the sharpness of my water, make it look softer. And it's okay if you go over your reflection with the orange. We're gonna come back to this part last, but I'm going over one more time after you're done with just the orange and water and trying to make it look softer. Okay, I'll dab my brush in water, use a little bit more, right? A little more orange and water, and glaze it over everything you just added. And then as you go down here, obviously it's gonna fade to the lighter color, so I'm not gonna add too much here. Just a little bit of that orange and let it fade. So now I'm gonna go over everything and make it even brighter and finalize it with starting with my detail brush and some white. And we're gonna repeat the process again. We're gonna add the brightest glow, just bring it down. You can even go all the way, try to keep it as straight as you can. And then it fades out, right? We're not gonna add too much white everywhere, but just right here, mainly. I wanna keep this bright. Okay? Like that. So now I'm gonna dab my brush in water, use this color next, right? With a little bit of water and paint. And right on the edge, we're gonna kind of blend it with the white. A little bit, not too much. We wanna keep that dark color there. Okay, so I'm going to use a little bit of this color and create some transition. So a little bit of this bright color and little fade, right? And this is where you can go back, maybe use this orange, and mix those two, get an in-between color. And I'm gonna go over some of these and make it a little cleaner, right? A little cleaner. I'm going to use a little bit of white actually. Right in here, I want to make this a little lighter. Use less white. And with the detail brush, kind of make these skinny ripples here. Basically now we're finalizing this part by adding all the finer details that you can barely see in our water. I'll stop right there. I can always come back to any of these parts later, but let's move on before I get carried away I'm going to add some grass in the water right here on the left side, reflecting down as well, and a little bit of grass right here and some in here. So I'm going to start fresh and mix a few colors so far. So I have a little bit of white, half a thumb, a little bit of medium yellow, and a touch of ultramarine blue, and then medium yellow, crimson red, and lemon black. And finally, let's add lemon black and a touch of medium yellow for our darkest color. All right, let's pick up our flat brush, dab it in the water, and tap it on the paper towel. So we're gonna start with this color first, right here, this middle one, and a little bit of water and paint. We're gonna randomly start to add some of these little grass details. And don't be afraid to overlay, because that's how you create interesting paintings, when you keep adding details. And if you like your background as it is and you don't want to add too much, you can leave it, but I like to add a little bit of character and a little more detail to my paintings. Okay. I'm going to reflect some of it down, not too much. Okay, and then as you go down to reflect, some of them are going to be more wavy, you know. Don't make them perfect. Okay. Continue on with that middle color, and let's go on this side. Switch it up a little bit, and let's add our first one right in here. We're going to kind of reflect that. You don't have to make them perfect. Okay, continue on with this color, and right here I'm gonna just start to add, barely pressing, and reflect. Okay, I'm going to use the darkest color now. I want it to be a little more darker. I'm going to kind of make a little more of a circular shape. Make some of them a little bigger. Okay. And you can add as many as you wish. Tall grass. And then reflection is going to look rough. And we're going to have a little bit of ground somewhere in here. It's going to be dark. Some patches of ground. And also you can do this with your detail brush. We're just getting the first base, and then we're gonna go back, make it a little detailed, more detailed. Add some of these beautiful little details to the top. And I'm using the corner of my flat brush and kind of creating little waves, little ripples right in the water. Barely pressing, as you could see. Okay, that's good enough. And here, I'm gonna add some next to this dock, just the darkest color we have mixed. Some bigger ones here. That's good right there. I don't want to overdo it because I still like my background colors to be showing. All right, let's move on here. We're gonna have some in here, some grass. Dab my brush in water, continue with the darkest color. And then the rope, remember this rope? We're just gonna bring it all the way. Like this. And I want to add a couple more on this side, darker ones. I'm going to go over some of these. And now we can go with our detail brush. Now that we kind of got the sketch down, the placements, we can go a little more and go over with the dark, add our final, tall grass in the water with water and this darkest color. We're just gonna try to connect and make it a little bit more cleaner, right? And sharper, as you see. And I'm gonna add a little more detail, right? Like this. Make them look a little more realistic. Connect them and just have fun. Your placement could be different than mine. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna spend some time connecting and creating my details to the grass. And once I'm done, I'll show you what I get. And then when I reflect, basically, this is where it touches the water, right? Right here, this one. From here, you can just make a few little waves. Okay, not everywhere. You get the point. And so now I'm gonna, like I said, do this. And once I'm done, I'll show you and we'll go from there. And now we can add some highlights doing the same thing once you're done with water and the green color. Okay, we're gonna swirl it with water and we're gonna add some green highlights. Okay, for example, right here. Right, I'm gonna go over some of these and make it stand out a little more so that it could look more 3D and not as flat. Okay, so with water and some paint, I'm gonna quickly do this part. You can see I'm not using too much green. I want to keep it pretty simple. Add a few bright ones if you'd like. Okay, and we're not going to do this everywhere. We're mainly going to do it to the ones closer to us. Add some color. Do the same thing on this side. Let's go over some of these. Okay, only mainly here on the bottom. We're not going to add too much on top. Okay, that's good enough. Let's add a highlight to our rope. So I added titanium white. I'm going to use this middle color and some white. Get a little bit of a lighter color, maybe gray tan color. And let's just add some highlights to the rope on top, maybe a little lighter. And go on top. you go. Let's continue and kind of get the base down. We already have the base down sketch, right? But let's get a little bit of a darker tone to our boat and dock so we can see the image a little more. And I'm going to use the colors I already have here, and I'm going to start with covering the bigger areas that I know that are going to be dark. So I'm just going to use this and my number 4 brush, use this darkest color here, and we're just going to, so here's our boat here, right? It's this is where it's going to start hitting the water. So I'm guessing it's going to go in. And it's going to be pretty dark in here. So I'm going to go all the way to this part right here. This is going to be dark, the darkest areas. And here, the dock is going to be crooked and not straight, so and we're going to have the shadow of the boat be more like right here. So I'm going to kind of make it like we did with the plants, wavy, and let it fade out. Right, and then the rest is going to be pretty dark. I'm going to add some details, of course, here. But for now, let's make a black, dark shadow. Okay, there you go. All right, so I'm going to use the darkest color again and continue adding my shadows. For example, right here, right? I'm going to go at an angle and kind of go down a little bit. So kind of go this way, not straight, right? You don't want to keep it flat, but I'm going to go a little bit at an angle all the way and keep it consistent. All right. So one right here, right, as you could see. And you can make them as long as you could kind of, it goes in and becomes a little smaller, right? Then the shadows and the separations of your wood, of the dock, can be different for you. So it does not have to look like mine, but we're making thick shadows right here first. Okay, there's going to be some shadows in here. Something like this. And it does not have to be straight. Remember, as long as it's somewhat straight, you're good to go. And this is like an old dock, so a lot of it's in the water moving and separating, cracking. The wood is cracking, you know. I'm gonna make this one a little thicker because it's the closest to us. Okay, dab my brush in the water if you need it to run smooth on the canvas. Okay, continue. Dab my brush in the water and then pick up more of this color, right? Make this thicker. And I'm barely pressing on these parts. Something like this. And we'll go over go over him in more detail later. Now I'm just adding some texture, barely pressing to my dock with just water and the darkest color, creating some texture for fun to my dock. You could do the same thing on this side. Okay, continue on. Okay, something like this. All right, continue with that darkest color. Let's create a shadow in here. And we're gonna start to detail a little bit the boat. Our first kind of rough the second layer of the boat, it's still gonna look rough, right? A little bit of dark shadow. We're just adding the darker shadows first. And then we'll go over and add color and things like that later. So this darker shadow goes in here. And then this part, remember? Let's make this a little darker as well. And we're gonna go over these parts again later. And then here. Okay, I'm gonna go over with a little bit of water and the darkest color, not too, you could see I don't have too much color, right? I'm just going over the edge of my boat, creating a little bit of a darker look to it, shadow. I'm going to make the inside darker. Dab my brush in the water. I don't want to overdo it, so I'm going to use a little bit of this brownish color that we have mixed instead of black. Lightly dab my brush in the water. And glaze it gently in the middle. A little bit more of that brownish color. Here we're going to start to go inside. And start to add a little bit more color, darker color with that. and just kind of cover it. It's okay. We're going to add the highlights later. Brighter highlights, so it's going to start to stand out. All right, so now I'm going to quickly switch to my flat brush and use the darkest color. I'm going to start to go over these little pieces of wood, make them a little more detailed, right? And then this one as well. Try to keep it as straight as you can, but if it's a little off, that's okay. This is where you could use your detail brush if you wanted to make it more cleaner. Add a little bit more darker shadows inside your boat and continue working on adding your dark shadows first. This is maybe a bench here. Something like that. We're starting to kind of detail it, but obviously it's going to be a rough sketch first. Okay, I'm going to quickly switch to my detail brush, right, and continue making some of the parts darker. For example, right here, right, around the boat. Make it a little darker around the edges first. And if you didn't like something, you can always adjust later. Going back and forth with your colors. Try to make it as clean as you can. The goal is to make it stand out. So it needs to be darker than the background. Water, right? So I'm going to continue with the darkest color. And there's like a little detail around the boat, and it just disappears, right? And then it gets bigger here. And it does the same thing. Something like that. And the rope maybe comes in here. There's little dark shadows and details, right? I'm going to start to add darker shadows inside my boat, for example, this part. And then little dark shadows inside, and it still looks rough, but we also don't want the boat to be perfect. Want to give it a nice character. And now, real quick, we got a rough sketch of the boat and the dock. We're gonna add the bright highlight, and then after that, we're gonna finalize the painting by adding one more layer and making it a little cleaner. So I added a little bit of white, orange, and medium yellow. And now we're gonna quickly use our number 4 brush and add our highlights with this color, right? So for example, we're gonna just kind of go over gently. We kind of want the background color still showing through, and we're going to go over where we think the light is going to hit the boat, right? Mainly on top right here. I'm going to add that gently, barely pressing, right? Add that bright highlight. And certain parts we might have to use our detail brush. But I'm gonna cover the big sections first, and then we'll go over everything again. Some of these parts I'm gonna have to like I said, use my detail brush. Okay, continue on. Maybe here I'm gonna have a little bit of that light highlight. And maybe there's a reflection in here, barely pressing. That's good enough. Let's continue, and we're going to be adding a bright highlight in here. And it's right if you go over some of your, details. We're going to finalize and make it cleaner after we add our final and third layer. And also with that brighter highlight, we're going to add the reflection of the sun onto our board dock here as well on some areas. So I'm pressing and making it look rough. I'm not using too much water now, just more paint, and you can see how rough it looks. So I'm going to create a little bit of the brighter highlight, and I'm going to skip some areas. I don't want to do it everywhere. That's good enough there. And then in here, more paint. Right, just random patches. If you're loving this tutorial and you're ready to go deeper with your painting, I'd love to invite you to my mentorship program. This is where I teach my most in-depth lessons, the ones I don't share anywhere else. Inside the mentorship, you'll get access to exclusive full-length tutorials, personalized feedback on your paintings from me, live Q&A calls where you can connect and ask questions, monthly painting challenges, giveaways, and more. This is my inner circle of artists who are serious about growing their skills. It's been amazing to see the progress our members make, and I'd love for you to join us. If you're interested, there'll be a link in the screen or also in the description down below. All right, let's get back to painting. Okay, I'm gonna start fresh, and now I'm gonna detail the boat and detail everything here, make it pop a little more and more cleaner. So we're gonna mix some new colors, and this is what I have. So I added half a thumb amount of white here, and then a little bit of medium yellow and orange, and then a little less white than this one, ultramarine blue, and a little more medium yellow than this one. Half a thumb amount of white here, a touch of medium yellow, a little more orange, a touch of ultramarine blue, and a small amount of lamp black. And then less white here, more ultramarine blue, and lamp black. And then I have about a thumb amount of black, lamp black, and crimson red. And if I need to, I'll mix more. So as I was mixing, I decided to make it a little darker and more on the green blue side, so I added more ultramarine blue to this one. And I was leaning towards like a lighter tan color, so I'm gonna leave this just in case I will decide to use this, but I'm gonna take about half of it, and I added more, half a thumb amount of white. I want to make it a little lighter, so I don't want to use too much of this color. I want it to be on a lighter tan looking color. And finally, I did add a little more lamp black, because this will be our darkest color with a crimson red and black, right? By itself, this will be adding in the darkest shadows of our bridge to make it pop more, right? So, and then I also want to make one more color in between these two. So I'm going to take part of this one, right? Part of this one, and mix it with the black. and it should be like a darker gray color, but it won't be as dark as this one. Just in case I need to use a little bit of it of a lighter kind of color instead of too dark. And in the video it's kind of hard to tell, but these are different because when I go into adding certain dark shadows, right, I don't want them to, the darkest spots with this color, I want it to be on certain areas to make them pop. For example, this dark area, right, will be on the board right here on the bottom. It's going to be very dark here. I want these to pop, and then also right here. I want this to be dark in here as well, and then in here, and then on some of the shadows inside, right? But then certain areas like right here, it's going to transition to a little bit of a smoother dark color. So from this color, it's going to go into a little bit of a lighter because it's getting closer to the light, right? Things like that. And that's why I'm mixing variety of color here. And I'm going to play with these colors to finalize this area here, okay? And I'm going to mix one more color. I want to create a little bit on the red side because I feel like I want like a little bit of a darker glow of the red. So I'm adding orange, a touch of orange, and crimson red. I'm going to take part of this color, the first one, just take part of it like that and mix it with this one. Okay. So I'm going to actually use a little more of this color, mix it with this, and that should be good. So I have plenty of colors here, and if I need to, I'll add more. You know, for the brighter highlights, we can mix more later. But for now, if you get something like this, you'll be good to go. So I'm going to clean my palette knife, and we're going to continue. Let's start with picking up our number 4 brush. Make sure it's nice and soft. I let it sit in the water. As always, all my number 8 and number 4 brushes, I always put them down as I'm mixing paint in my water jar, right? So that they can become soft. And so with a damp brush, we're going to start adding a little bit of color. Let's start with the green right here. I want a little bit of character to my boat, so I'm going to add a little bit of green right here and let it fade. Okay, a little bit of green. All right, so I'm going to use a little bit of more of this green and maybe this gray blue color. Yeah, that's much better right there. I want it to slowly transition to the brighter green. And it's going to fade out. Okay, so little details like that. I'm going to start to add a little bit of this lighter color. Kind of glaze it in. I want to make this a little lighter. Okay, and then add a little bit of that on this side. And then dab my brush in the water, tap it on the paper towel. Let's use this red. Let's make this part a little bit more on the red side. I'm adding some character to my boat so it won't look plain. I could leave it as the colors as they are plain and just kind of make it sharper and finalize it that way. But I think adding these little touches of color makes a big difference, makes it more interesting. Barely pressing, kind of glazing it more. Add a little bit of shadows and okay. And now I'm gonna use a little bit of this gray color, blue, and this second to the darkest. Mix those two. I'm gonna add a little bit of shadows in here, a little bit of lighter shadows. We're just making it look a little smoother, more cleaner. So this is where you just slowly work. You don't need to worry about paint drying, just work at your pace. I'm gonna bring a little bit down, maybe mix it with this color, and then I'm gonna make this a little, go a little bit lower. I want this to be a little sharper in here. Okay, that's much better. And then clean my brush. I'm gonna use a little bit of this tan color, like we did right here. I'm gonna make this a little brighter. Okay, I'm gonna clean my brush completely, and now I'm gonna use the darkest color and try to make this bottom part very clean. And sharp. You see how that stands out a little more? So part of this is gonna be faded, so I'm gonna spread the paint gently with water. Try to create a smoother transition to the red that we added. Adding some details like this to my boat. Okay, continue with the darkest color, and we're just gonna glaze it and go all the way to the edge here. Really make this area dark, And as you get closer here, I'm gonna add a little bit, maybe this color right here. Mix it with a little bit of red. And gently add that reflection. Dab your brush in the water. And I'm going to try to make it smooth from this area. I barely have any paint. And let it fade into the darker color. I'm going to use this color, remember? Our next darkest, and I'm going to just add it right on the edge. And go all the way like this. Okay. And now I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to add a few little details, reflections. So I'm going to use this color and try to add a little bit of the reflections from the boat, not too much here. A few little bright highlights. Okay. That's it. I don't want too much. That's good enough. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush completely, tap it on the paper towel. I'm going to use the darkest color and continue adding my darkest shadows, for example, right in here, right? I'm not going to go all the way out because it fades in here, but I'm going to add that right here. And then the darkest color right underneath here. Okay, that's good. And then with my darkest color, I'm going to start to add dark shadows on the bottom here to make my wood really pop. I'm gonna switch to my flat brush real quick, dab it on the water, and use the darkest color. And on the bottom mainly, we're gonna add that darkest color. And on the bottom right here, and remember, it doesn't have to be perfectly straight. Okay, something like this. And on the bottom right here. So I'm going to continue that all the way to the top. I'm going to add a few more darker ones to make it stand out right in here. Okay. And one more right in here. And now I'm gonna pick up my detail brush and use the darkest color. And we're gonna start to work, make our boardwalk stand out a little more. For example, right here, I'm gonna have a little bit of details reflecting. And make it crooked. Some boards are separating, you know. Barely pressing. Basically, I'm making everything look a little more sharper. So I'm gonna spend some time adding my little details like this. Remember, create some separations. Maybe there's some cracks in your wood, right? Don't be afraid to add on to your painting. It'll make it look more interesting. As you get closer, here there's going to be more visible cracks. Barely pressing. Same thing on this side. Maybe there's some little cracks inside here. All right, so you want to create some of these little details. Okay. Now it's starting to look more like wood, right? And then as you go up, you obviously make it more faded. Less of it, right? Small, little quick details. So now let's quickly use our number 4 and add a little more character to our wood. Let's start with this bluish color, and we're just gonna glaze it. Maybe use a little bit of a darker color, mix it in. Gonna add some pieces of wood that are a little darker. All right. Especially by the boat, right? It's gonna be more like shaded. Because of the shadow of the boat, right? And let it look rough like that. So I'm barely pressing. So a little more of this color. Okay, a little more. And then you can add some of that on this side, some of the darker shadows. Just a little bit. And some of the pieces of wood will make it a little bit darker like we did right here, to create variety of color. Okay, Clean my brush. And then I'm gonna use a little bit of this red and orange. Let's mix those randomly together. Let's add some color. Random color to our wood, right? Maybe it's glowing because of the sun reflection. So we want a little more interesting details. Continue on. Let's add a little bit in here. Warmer color. All right, that's good enough. Clean our brush. Let's add a little bit of this tan, lighter tan color, and a little bit of orange. More tan though. And let's make certain parts right here a little lighter. Add a little more details because these pieces are closer to us. So I'm barely pressing, and with water, I'm just gonna add little random details like this. So a little more of this tan color. Okay. So a little more. And you could use it by itself if you'd like. Let's add some in here. Barely pressing. And remember, this is more of the shaded area. So I'm gonna go up a little bit here. More focus more on this side. So a little bit right there. Skip some areas, you don't want it to be perfect. Okay, until you're happy with how it looks. And so now with the detail brush, we're gonna add a few more details. With this tan color, we're gonna start to add little, maybe nails or, you know, little details that you can see. So when they're closer to us, they're gonna be a little bigger. For example, right here and right there. Maybe there's one in here. And we're gonna try to fade that out. And don't make it straight. Move with the board, right? Certain pieces are going to be more on the left, on the right, you know. Okay. And do the same thing on this side. Make them a little bigger looking because they're closer to us. And it doesn't, like I said, it does not have to be perfectly aligned, as long as it goes from bigger ones to a little bit smaller as you go out, right? And with the same color, we're going to add some highlights like we did with the black, the darkest color. We're going to swirl our detail brush and we're going to go over, like we did the bottom part, we did the dark shadows. And then the top part of our wood pieces, we're going to add the highlights. Okay, so for example, right in here, we're going to go right underneath the dark shadow. And then in here on top, we're going to go over a little bit, you know, so it could stand out a little better. I'm going to skip some areas and add a little bit in here. On the bottom. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to finish it in here. Work around with water and try to add my brightest highlights here. Okay. Same thing here. And then with the black, the darkest color, you can add a little bit of shadows just on the bottom of some of these to make them pop a little more. Right? Barely pressing. And go all the way, let it fade. Okay, do the same thing on this side. All right, we can always come back to the dock later. Let's finish up and detail our boat. So with the detail brush, I'm gonna start with this lightest color again with some water. I'm gonna try to make certain things a little cleaner here. For example, right here, I want to bring this down a little more. Okay, maybe it comes down. Start to add a little more. Maybe make this a little brighter, this shadow. And then with water, fade it out. Okay, maybe there's something else here, reflecting. Okay, so before I continue there, I'm gonna correct something with my darkest color and make this a little bit go in here. Let's add a few little dark spots, little details. Of our boat. And you can add a little bit of bright highlight. Maybe there's little reflections. Happening. Okay, go back to your darkest color. Now continue this in here. Little details like that. Let's move on and pick up our number 4 brush and add a little bit of color. For example, this orange by itself. Let's go over and add some brighter color from the sunlight before we detail anything here. Obviously, I'm going to go over everything, but I just want to add a little more color. And then maybe a little bit in here from the glow of the sun. Maybe mix it with a tan color. Let's use a little bit of this tan color. Try to make certain areas bright on our wood here. Let's use the lightest tan color and add it randomly in here. I want this to be bright, this corner from the sunlight. And let it fade to the orange. Use a little bit of this red, orangey red, mix it with the orange. I want to make a little bit more glow of the orange on the inside of my boat. And then in here, I want to make it more on the gray color, this bluish gray. Maybe mix it with the tan. A little bit of a lighter color. I want this to be more on the tan side. I don't want it to be all orange. I want to create a little bit of a cooler background here. So maybe this part is a little darker. With some orange showing through, right? And make this grayish blue so it could stand out a little better. We're trying to create a fade. And it's okay if you go over what you've already sketched. So we're creating a fade to the more of a warmer colors in here. Let's add a little bit of that grayish blue in here. I'm going to use a little bit of just the red now and add a little bit of a glaze with water in here. I want this to be a little warmer. And it's okay if you go over and in here as well. Kind of glaze it over where you left off to add a little bit of warmth. So a little bit more of that red on the edge right in here. Let it fade to the lighter color right in here. Okay. Starting to see the picture a little red in here. Picture a little bit better. Clean my brush. And I'm going to use a little bit more of the green with water. Kind of go over a little bit more. I want to make it pop with green a little bit on this side. Let it fade. It's a lot of back and forth, but it's worth it. You can even add the green, by the way, also on your board dock. Just a few little highlights of green, right? As well, that really brings more character to the wood. You can barely see, but these little details really is how you make your painting more detailed and really stand out, right? Seems like it's plain, right? The boardwalk, but there's a lot of color going on. And that's the beautiful thing about painting, is that when you really focus on something, especially during the sunset, you'll start to notice a bunch of variety of color, right? Coming in. Because the glow and it's reflecting in all the reflections bouncing off of each other, it just creates a lot of different colors. So there's no right way of doing it, you know, as long as you get the idea down, right? As long as you get the shading down. For example, this part, I want to make it a little even more darker so you can see what I mean. So I'm going to use a little bit of the darkest color in my number 8 brush with water so you can see how this is going to stand out now. I'm going to go over and just glaze it over to create a shadow of my boat. Glaze it over. All the way up. Keep it kind of even. And we're going to go all the way out about this much. And just add that dark shadow of the boat. And as you go in a little bit, the shadow becomes bigger, right? Because it's getting closer to us. And then we're going to fade it out. That's good right there. But you see that detail? Adding that detail made it even more pop. Our boat. Okay. So I'm going to add a little bit of the water and just a dark color. Maybe this one. Let's add this one. I'm going to make certain areas a little darker in here, for example. to look more faded. A little bit more faded in here. All right, so let's continue with our detail brush, and now this is where we go over with the darkest color and start to really make the details pop. For example, right here, I'm gonna start adding these little, well, first I'm gonna go around and try to correct like we did with Doc, right? We're gonna try to make it clean. And with water and the darkest color, we're gonna try to create a nice little fade. Right, we're making sure everything's sharp now. Even in here. Okay, adding all these beautiful details. And now we're gonna work on our inside of the reflections right in here of the little boards. Kind of come down and then go at an angle. And then as you go in a little bit more, right, they'll become a little smaller. Just keep that in mind. So the ones closer to us will be a little thicker. I'm going to spend some time working on finalizing these little details, and then I'll do the same thing. Remember, as you go in, they get a little smaller, and I'll show you what I get. And I'm not going to do it everywhere. I'm going to skip some areas here, and then on this side as well, we're going to add, remember, I want to make it sharper and cleaner here. Okay. Maybe there's a few dark shadows inside. It does not have to be all perfect. I'm just basically going over and adding another layer to our painting. All right, I can spend a lot of time working here, playing with my colors, which I'll do. Totally up to each person how much work and detail you want to add, but it's basically back and forth until you're happy with your dock and your boat and your grass, right? And one of the things I wanted to show you guys is I want to make it a little bit more on the warmer side. So I'm going to clean my number 8 brush. I'm going to add a glow of medium yellow straight out of the tube with water by itself. And with this color, right, we're going to add a glaze, a little bit of paint and more water. We're going to add a glaze more where the bright areas are, right? This is going to be the brightest of the reflection on my boat. So I'm just going to add a little bit of color to my boat right here, right? I want to make it stand out. And can fade it out maybe right here as well. Okay, that's good. You can go over these parts as well. Okay, we're just adding it a little more warmth. For example, right here on my dock, I'm gonna go over some of these. Not too much, but just on some of them, just to create that warm glow from the sunlight. Okay, skip some areas and glaze it like this. That's good enough. And here it is. I'll be done for today. Now you can come back to any part of the painting and adjust, correct, right? Totally up to you. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Thank you guys for being here. Please be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for more. Take care and God bless.